Hi, I'm AJ with Humbucker Soup. In this video, I'm going to teach you about different types of humbucker bobbins. So just like everything else that we've talked about so far, when it comes to making pickups, there's a lot of different options when it comes to bobbins. One of the first things you want to look at is what type of material they're made out of. These ones in particular are ABS. Back here, I have some that are polycarbonate, and there's another kind called butyrate. And butyrate is something that you would probably use if you're trying to replicate a PAF. But if you want to do any kind of wax potting, it might be best to avoid those because they can melt, where both the ABS and the polycarbonate would hold up just fine. Next thing you want to look at is, like we talked about earlier, in most cases, it's common to use a screw side and a slug side, but that doesn't always have to be the case. So if you wanted to make a pickup with two screw sides, you just want to make sure that you have two metal spacers. And in this case, this one is set up to where it also uses two plastic shims. Now, if you're using the metal spacers, the plastic shims aren't always necessary, but you can use them if you want. On the other hand, if you decided to make a pickup with two slug sides, you would get rid of the metal spacers altogether and you would keep the shims, because the slugs are going to set up against the magnet and then you just want the shims to hold it level. One of the things that you really need to be aware of is that there are different spacings, as we talked about before. So you want to make sure, especially if you're going to use the metal spacers, that all of the dimensions line up. So if you're using a 50mm bobbin, you want to make sure you have a 50mm metal shim and that your base plate is also 50mm. You could probably get away with using something different if you were using slugs, but I wouldn't recommend it. A couple of other things that you can look at is when you get bobbins from the manufacturers, some of them are drilled on the bottom and already set up to run your lead wire. In some cases, you might have to use a small drill bit and make your own. On these ones in particular, I think these are notched out so that you could use that for a lead wire, but I'll usually still just drill that out myself. On the other hand, there are some that are already set up for you. So when it comes to making pickups, one thing to keep in mind is that the coil wire is very thin and it's very brittle. If you look at it wrong, it can break. So it's a good idea to do some prep work on your bobbins. And when it comes to ABS, since they're not all that perfect from the factory, it may take a little bit more cleanup. I usually just take some 600 grit sandpaper and just kind of smooth out the inside edges and any other rough spots so that it won't break the wire. Another thing that you could look at for some different possibilities is different colors. If you want to do either a zebra or a reverse zebra, or just some other different colors of bobbins. As long as they're available and they'll work for you, you can do that. Another thing is if you are buying different bobbins, you should try to buy them all from the same company or manufacturer, because they're not all created equal. They have different dimensions. Some of them are either taller or shorter, and sometimes they'll work or won't work with your spacers. So it's just something that you should be aware of and make sure that you get all the right stuff. Another couple of things worth mentioning is anytime that you're using screws or slugs, there are different options. You have flathead screws, and sometimes you can get the hex head screws. Not to mention different types of coatings, such as gold, black, or chrome, and there's also different grades of screws. Also, anytime that you drill out your bobbin for that lead wire, just be aware of where the metal spacers go. Because if you drill it too close, you may end up having to push the metal spacer over your wire, or you would have to grind out a notch. And that could affect the magnetic field of the pickup, but in some cases it may be necessary to make everything work. I hope you learned something from this video, and we'll see you in the next one.